welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B growth guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Wissam Akra. Now, I'm going to read his bio because it's really rich, and I want to make sure I get it right. Wissam is the founder and CEO of ToughLeaf. They're a pioneering platform driving diversity and empowerment in the construction industry. Wissam has a passion for innovation, a deep commitment to inclusivity. He's been instrumental in reshaping the way that small and diverse businesses access opportunities and resources. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in the construction space. Wissam's extensive knowledge and experience gained from more than 15 years of dedicated work on construction projects has given him a really uniquely positioned space in the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he's gained insights from that to pivot his business a couple times for growth. He's a professional engineer, graduate in civil engineering, and he further honed his skills with a master's degree in construction management and an MBA. So, Wissam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So that was a mouthful to talk about sort of your background and expertise. Tell us a little bit about what you do there at ToughLeaf and your founding story. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah, it was an interesting path to get there. So as you mentioned, I did my master's in construction management at Columbia. I then moved to manage mega infrastructure and development projects around the country, mostly on the Eastern United States. So I managed about $1 billion on Second Avenue Subway as a resident engineer with WSP and Parsons Brinckerhoff. I then worked on Hudson Yards, managed projects there, which was a private development. Moved to Dragados, where I was managing their business development in the Eastern United States for mega projects, so everything over $500 million. Was part of the team that won that $3.6 billion Hampton Roads Bridge and Tunnel down in Norfolk, Virginia. And I mentioned all of these to kind of highlight the red thread between all of these jobs is that we always had diversity requirements. Came to minority-owned, women-owned, disadvantaged, small, veteran-owned businesses being a part of those construction teams. Now, the difference between 2010 while working on Second Avenue Subway versus 2018-19 working on Hampton Roads was earlier on these requirements used to be goals. So there was really there was a carrot if you meet them, but there was no stick. And a lot of times contractors, developers, construction management companies were not able to hit these goals, but there was no significant penalty along with it. However, as time went by, and we saw a lot of changes at the turn of the decade, making those into requirements. And if you don't meet your requirements, then you start paying fines, penalties. Right. We saw contractors getting disqualified from projects that they won, getting kicked out of jobs, getting barred from bidding on future government projects. And at the end of the spectrum there, and this might be surprising to some people, is that construction execs ended up in prison for trying to fraud the requirements and trying to present themselves in a different way. And that was anywhere from 10 to 10 years, which I'm sure no construction executive wants to find themselves in that position. And at that time, I was like, well, here's a very big problem that we're facing as a contractor. And, me being in a business development position, I can see our competitors, our partners, our joint venture partners facing the same issue. And at that time, I was like, well, everyone talks about it, but no one's really doing anything to really use technology that we have at our fingertips. We use it for a lot of other, functions of our life, of our business, but we're not using it to solve this problem. So at that point, I was doing my MBA at Columbia. I was like, again, big problem. Whoever can figure it out is set for good financial returns, but at the same time, this is my chance to do well by doing good.
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I needed to have something to drive me other than like, hey, let me just create a company, and it had to have some altruistic motive, and that was toughly for me. It was kind of the intersection of those two things, and at the time I was like, okay, well, I'll quit my job and I'll start a company to particularly focus on this solution, and here we are 3 years later.
That's such an interesting story. And, I'm sure, a lot of our listeners like you and me, like went through that business training of, regulatory changes can create market opportunities, but it still sort of, requires a business that can sort of understand what that opportunity is and then capture it in order to really make a market. I'm curious. So you saw the change in regulatory, you saw everyone's talking about it. I love the idea of, really starting with an ideal of doing good in order to do well. How did you sort of turn a changing market environment into a real opportunity for the company and create a real value proposition around that? Because I'm sure there are other ways to, sort of mitigate this risk or satisfy these requirements and be compliant. What was it, that you saw as the opportunity for Tough Leaf?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question, because everyone thinks when they find an opportunity, at least first-time founders, that whatever they think is the right solution is going to be the right solution, and it
Uh-huh.
very rarely is. And that's the case with us. I'd love to sit here and say, yeah, I knew this was what we're going to do from day one, but we did not. We really started selling. We understood what the problem was, which is contractors don't have access to data on diverse businesses. So if
Okay.
you don't have data on a company, how are you gonna hire them and give them millions of dollars worth of contracts if you don't know what they've done in the past, you don't know what insurance they have, you don't
Right.
know if they're in the union or not. You're gonna have to go through and call hundreds or thousands of businesses and ask them a ton of questions that they're not gonna want to answer over the phone. Uh,
Right.
so that was kind of our problem statement, is like, well, if we have the data, that makes everything much easier.
Sure.
We collected that data, and at the time, our value prop versus what's existing in the market is, the consultants, which is basically the alternative to using Tough Leaf, is using a consultant and paying them an hourly fee to kind of find these diverse businesses for you. The consultants were doing everything manually. So your bill is going to stack up. The results are going to be lackluster, because how much can they really do in that period of time? Because we all know that the bidding or submitting a proposal on a construction project is very limited in duration.
Yeah.
So it's that was our value prop, is, hey, we have that data, we can provide you with that data to the general contractors that they can use to accelerate the process and find the right diverse businesses. But obviously that's not where we end the solution that we ended up selling today.
Okay. So that's a really interesting pivot. So you started as essentially a database, an aggregation of all of this information that they needed, which obviously has a great value proposition of saving tons of time, removing the need to hire a consultant that's probably overcharging, particularly in this high pressure environment where they, have to bid quickly, and they have to, have all of their, sort of orchestrated partners lined up for the project quickly. But today, as we've been talking, you told me that today you're more of an end-to-end solution. So how did you know that that's really what the market wanted instead of just this database? Because I'm sure the database, there's not a lot of overhead in kind of maintaining that database. Like, that's a lot of technology solution that scales really well. End-to-end solution, you got to like add some more services on top of that data, probably some more technology, and get a little finer interface. How did you recognize that that was the real opportunity for growth, and not think that you were just jumping to a new idea? Because a lot of time founders are, they're innovators and they want to, focus on new ideas. And I've even, worked with some startups where they have a great idea and then they get bored with it, even though it's still the right idea for the market. So then they jump to something else, and then they jump to something else. How did you know that was the right pivot?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is having hundreds of conversations with our customers,
Okay.
and two is asking them to put their money where their mouth is. Uh,
Okay.
and I'll tell you like the first time we're doing this, it's not like or the first solution that we launched, it's not like we didn't talk to customers, but you know, as a founder, being from the construction industry, sometimes I felt like people are telling you what you want to hear. And then we had, you know, tons of letters of intent signed that they're going to pay once we build this solution. And that was kind of it the first time. And then after we built it, obviously not all of the letters of intent, or very small number of letters of intent, ended up being customers, or else we wouldn't have had to pivot.
Sure.
But the second time, you know, while we were thinking about the pivot, we went ahead and, you know, we spoke to all the customers we spoke to the first time. We went to more than 15 different conferences that have to do with construction technology, and solutions for, you know, compliance in construction. And we started presenting this new solution of like, okay, here's what we're thinking of doing, this end-to-end solution where the contractor, all they need to do is fill a form on Tough Leaf saying, hey, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for, just as an example, an electrical company that's minority owned, that can do work in the Bronx. They need to be in the union. They need to have under 1.1 EMR rating, and a lot of other basically characteristics. And all they need to do was fill that form. And then our system is going to match these requirements with the capabilities of the diverse businesses that we've collected in our data. And then on top of that, we've built an outreach platform that will then outreach to the companies that matched and let them know, hey, our client X is looking for us, you know, a partner just like you. Are you interested in working with them? And if so, can you provide a bid by July 31st? And doing so now, it became an end-to-end solution, because we're not only giving them data, we're giving them companies that are going to provide bids on their projects. And then it later developed to like, yeah, we can collect the bids ourselves, so we can, you know, get you on average 3 bids per trade that you give us. And then we built on top of that the good faith effort documentations, or the outreach documentation as well. But so that's number one, is we went and we spoke to a lot of people. Number two was we asked them to put their money where their mouth is. So we're like, okay, if you're saying this is great and you'd love to see it built, you gotta pay something, even if it's, you know, $1,000, even if it's $2,000. But we want to make sure that you know, this is something that people are serious about, that they're willing to pay for, not just, you know, you're brainstorming together.
So that's really interesting. And, you know, I do a lot of study in sort of like, you know, business design and those things. And you're obviously hitting on all of those best practices of get out of the building, go talk to the customer. And then it seems like you probably had sort of like a prototyping scenario where you had a bunch of conversations which led you to believe, oh, they don't just want the database, they want a matching and outreach solution. And so then you kind of described that as a sort of a verbal prototype of the software that you would design, and then had, you know, sort of feedback on that. Were there other kind of verbal prototypes that you discovered from those conversations that you tried out, and then sort of validated that one was better than the other? Or was this one really sort of the clear winner from all the conversations that you had?
No, there were others. Like at the beginning, we were thinking of just doing the matching.
Yeah.
And you know, let the outreach be done by the contractors.
Right.
We actually did have a couple of customers that felt very strongly about that, and we tried it. But what we found was it didn't really work, because, you know, we matched them with companies, but then a
They
different
don't
person
take any
had to call
action.
them,
Yeah.
and a different
Interesting.
email coming from a different email address. So like they can't link that, okay, this is the same thing that's going on, and led to the customers not finding enough value, because they're like, hey, you said this company is interested, but when we spoke to them, we never got a reply. So that's, you know, we're like, okay, or this is definitely not working. We don't want to sell something that the customers don't like. So we discontinued it. But yeah, we did try a couple of different things to end up here. And again, it's all thanks to our customers. And I'll give a shout out to, you know, the founder who actually helped me with this, and he knows himself, so I'm not gonna name him, but told me, like, even if you need to ask them, hey, you have $20 in your pocket, give it to me now and I'll build it. Just take something. Just don't build something for free. And that was honestly very, very helpful, because we got a lot of ideas, but when we asked people to, you know, again, put their money where their mouth is, people change. Automatically, you see their change. They're like, oh, this is not just a conversation. This is actually leading somewhere.
That's right. That's super interesting, and again, really great application of best practices in business design and all that sort of agile business building. And clearly, you made the right bet because as we've been talking, you went from being just sort of the founding team to 10 folks to now 30 folks in the space of just 3 years. That's a lot of really accelerated growth and a lot of you're kind of creating a new market that didn't really exist before. So I'm sure that that leads to some challenges with scale. And we've talked in the past, like how did you sort of mitigate the risk of, well, instead of it just being one person who's responsible for the marketing and the sales, now you've got some marketing dedicated folks, you've got some sales dedicated folks. They're kind of going to market potentially in different ways. How are you mitigating the maybe friction or different what's the phrase, intelligent people can disagree on the right way, and so it doesn't mean either's wrong. How do you mitigate that? How do you sort of synthesize and sort of create a business around that without it becoming too much friction?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely interesting because scaling is a different challenge, right? Like one challenge is get the customers what they want, the other challenge is do it at scale so that you can get enough customers. And it's
Yeah,
always hard for especially everyone on the founding team to kind of give away responsibilities, specifically when things are going well, right? So our founding team, we had myself and someone that was managing sales and marketing and someone that was managing engineering and product. So we had to split out the sales and marketing functions and get to one new person that's managing marketing. The same thing with the engineering and product, and that process was hairy at the beginning, but ended up working out. Specifically to your question of sales and marketing, we had a challenge of, okay, where do we draw the line that this is the difference between what the sales function is and what the marketing function is?
yeah,
And how do we try to align on goals because they each have their own different goals to hit at the end of the year. And sometimes, they can be somehow conflicting because
that's right.
marketing in our organization, at least, is really casting that wide net and trying to generate demand for the product. And at
Yeah,
the same time, it's a very big educational aspect to our marketing team because what we've built is something that didn't exist in the market, specifically in the construction vertical. So marketing was responsible to kind of educate the broader construction market on what is Tough Leaf, how does this work, why does it make sense for Tough Leaf to exist,
yeah.
and sales was more responsible for like, okay, how can I close this particular customer or this particular segment? And how can I get them to become a paying customer? So just maneuvering the space and the interactions between these two departments was obviously a challenge at the beginning, but then, through a lot of different conversations, we now have alignment meetings every week just to make sure that we're always aligned. We're able to kind of get past that, and now, they're working perfectly together.
It's so smart of you to sort of recognize that there's the potential for friction and then to sort of tackle that head on. So oftentimes we see companies just sort of kind of operate them in silos.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we always do with companies that we work with is really encourage, like, don't necessarily have a marketing team and a sales team and even a customer success team, but we emphasize like a revenue team.
Mhm.
They have different sort of functions and roles within that revenue team, but they're all part of the same team. And just like you talked about having these like regular alignment meetings, we like to, sort of build like a shared scorecard so that there's objectives around, creating, opportunities and leads and generating demand. And then there's other objectives around moving opportunities to the sales pipeline, and even others around renewals, upsells, or referrals. But you create alignment between everyone so that they're all working on, maybe different parts of the same system, but it's all the same system instead of just, well, we gave you a bunch of leads. If you didn't close them, that's your fault.
Right.
And likewise, well, all of your leads suck. And so what are you even doing over there in marketing? Whereas creating this alignment just changes the dynamic so much more and leads to a lot more success.
Absolutely. And yeah, an big example of that is like, inbound leads, right? Like if we're
Yep.
doing Google ads or LinkedIn ads and marketing is really responsible for that part. and then they go over to the sales pipeline, and exactly what you said, right? Like, oh, they're bad leads. No, you don't know how to close, right? So
Right.
it's having that alignment meeting where like thinking about, okay, what kind of leads do we want? What kind of keywords are we using? And it's not just marketing coming up with these keywords, it's with the help of the revenue team, as you call it, or we call it, or the go-to-market team, so that we're all kind of a part of this process. So it doesn't feel like, oh, if I get an ad from Google Ads, then this is separate. No, it's all the same thing. We're all working together to get to the same goal, which is, that what comes before or after the dollar sign, right?
That's right. Well, and it's a business objective, not like a little fiefdom. Like marketing isn't just measured by the volume of leads, whatever the quality is, and sales isn't just measured by the number of deals they close, even if they're deals that are terrible that you can never renew. You have that sort of consistency and alignment across, which is so smart. So tell us about something that's on the horizon for Tough Leaf that you're excited about. I know you got some new developments coming out.
Yeah, so one thing that our customers were consistently asking for throughout the past 6 months is the ability to track their diverse spending.
Mhm.
And we kept on getting these requests, when sales was in doing demos with customers, that question always came up, do you do diversity tracking? Same thing with marketing, when they're doing a webinar or sending out mass emails, we kept on getting those questions. So we're like, okay, let's actually start thinking about this now that we have the matching outreach, working well. And we've been building a diversity tracking product with one of the largest GCs in the country, top 5 in the ENR, that is, acting as our design partner, so that we can build this system that allows contractors to track their diverse spend across different geographies, across different certifications, and across different business units, and then be able to kind of aggregate them when they wish to make a presentation to the board, and disaggregate them when they wish to figure out, okay, which office is performing better than the other office, and try to figure out why is that happening and how can we improve it. So that's something we've been building. We're excited to launch that very shortly. It's going to be in this quarter, in Q3, as we're continuing to kind of work through the kinks with our design partner and producing a solution that everyone wants to see. But we're very excited about it, and so are our customers. We did kind of a early email to say, hey, this is coming, would you be interested to try it as a pilot? And we got a great responses back.
That's great. Well, and that highlights such an interesting thing where, marketing can be such a vital strategic role within the organization if it's done right. And clearly you've done a great job of building a feedback mechanism so that marketing isn't just out there, leading webinars, and sales isn't just out there doing demos. They're listening. For what's that market intel that's going to shape the product vision, so that you can really sort of innovate and grow for what the market really wants, rather than the engineers just thinking, well, we think they want this, or we think they want this feature. Instead, you're using that marketing and sales function, that go-to-market function, as you call it, as that intel, which allows you to create the thing that they really do want, and the thing they'll actually be willing to pay for, which will fuel that next stage of growth. So smart, so smart.
Yeah, and I think that's critical for any startup to do that and do it right. Like, I can't claim that we're doing it right. Maybe I'll tell you when we do this podcast in 3 years if we're doing it right or not. But I think it's very critical, because that's the only way to kind of grow in a manner that makes sense for the market.
Yeah. So let's just assume that maybe someone on the podcast is actually dealing with some of these regulatory issues and looking for a solution. Give us the pitch. Why should they work with Tough Leaf instead of other options out there?
All right, fun. So basically, if you're trying to find diverse businesses for your project, which at this point you understand why that's very important, working with Tough Leaf basically enables you to do that in a very cost-efficient and time-efficient manner, because all you need to do is provide us with your requirements for diverse businesses, and then our platform is going to match those with diverse businesses that make sense for you, and then outreach for them to get you on average 3 bids per trade. So you're not only meeting your compliance requirements, which is why most customers start with Tough Leaf. But the reason why they expand and they become enterprise customers is because they see that allows them to win more business themselves. So they start thinking of us as a compliance tool, and then they start thinking of us as a business development tool. And that can be highlighted, with one of our customers, Structural Technologies. They wanted to go into the Seattle market, and they tried to do so without Tough Leaf, but they were way more successful with Tough Leaf because we're able to give them a full read of the market, find them partners that can fulfill that 30% compliance requirement in a cost-efficient manner. Because if you're only getting one bid from a diverse subcontractor or a small subcontractor, then you're going to have to take that bid so you can comply, right? Even if it's
That's right.
50% more expensive. Whereas
Right.
if I'm getting you 3 different bidders and 3 different proposals, then you're going to find one that's more expensive and one that's exactly what you thought, and maybe one that's cheaper, because creating a competition will give you optionality, and then you can build your team in a way that makes sense for you so you can win that project. And once customers start saying that, that's when they really understand the value of Tough Leaf. Like, we can help you really win more projects through compliance, because you're getting any bid that's out there in the market, whereas your competitor is not.
That's great. And what's the old phrase? From quantity comes quality. When you
Right.
have those options, that's when you really have the ability to make the smartest decisions. Whereas if you only got one option,
You gotta go with
kind
it.
of don't, you can't be smart. You just have to do
Yeah.
the one you got. This has been an awesome conversation with Sam. I really enjoyed the time to catch up. We could talk all day, but I got to be mindful of your time. How can folks get in touch with you?
They can email us at info@toughleaf.com. If it's specifically sales, they can email Nia directly, our head of sales. Her email is Nia, Neah, @toughleaf.com. You can go through our website, take a look, schedule a demo directly with us. It's toughleaf.com as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time, Wissam, and I look forward to seeing how this continues to grow.
Thank you, Mark. Really enjoyed the conversation, and really appreciate you having us on your podcast.
Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.